Welcome to Beyond the Stars, where tonight we embark on a peaceful journey to Earth's moon, our closest celestial companion that has illuminated human nights for millions of years, inspired countless poets and artists, guided ancient navigators across oceans, and now stands as humanity's gateway to exploring the broader solar system and beyond. This relaxing exploration will guide you through 100 fascinating facts about the moon as you drift gently toward restful sleep, allowing the serene beauty of our lunar companion to wash over you like soft moonlight, filtering through a quiet window on a calm evening. Tonight is not about dramatic proclamations or sensational discoveries, but rather a calm and thorough contemplation of the natural satellite that orbits our planet, the only world beyond Earth that humans have walked upon, and the cosmic neighbor that has shaped our planet's tides, stabilized our climate, and illuminated our nights since long before our species existed. Let your breathing slow, your muscles relax completely, and your mind drift peacefully as we explore this ancient world together, discovering the science, history, and profound connection between Earth and its moon. The first fact about the moon is that it orbits Earth at an average distance of approximately 384,400 kilometers. Though this distance varies because the moon's orbit is slightly elliptical rather than perfectly circular, ranging from about 356,000 kilometers at perigee, when it's closest, to about 406,000 kilometers at apogee, when it's farthest, and this variation affects how large the moon appears in our sky. The second fact reveals that the moon is Earth's only natural satellite, the fifth largest moon in the entire solar system after Jupiter is Ganymede, Callisto, and Io and Saturn, Titan, and remarkably large compared to its parent planet, with a diameter of 3,474 kilometers, about 1/4 the diameter of Earth, making it proportionally one of the largest moons relative to its planet in our solar system. The third fact tells us that the moon formed approximately 4.5 billion years ago, shortly after Earth itself coalesced from the solar nebula, and the leading theory, called the Giant Impact Hypothesis, proposes that a Mars-sized object named Theia collided with the young Earth, ejecting enormous amounts of material into orbit that eventually coalesced to form the moon, explaining why the moon's composition is similar to Earth's mantle, but lacks a large iron core. The fourth fact is that despite being our closest celestial neighbor, the moon is gradually moving away from Earth at a rate of about 3.8 centimeters per year due to tidal interactions that transfer angular momentum from Earth's rotation to the moon's orbit, meaning that billions of years ago, the moon appeared much larger in Earth's sky, and the length of Earth's day was considerably shorter. And if this peaceful lunar journey helps you unwind and drift toward restful sleep, if you find value in this contemplative approach to astronomy, we warmly invite you to subscribe to Beyond the Stars and enable notifications so you can join us each week as we explore cosmic wonders with thoughtful narration that prioritizes understanding and tranquility over sensationalism. The fifth fact reveals that the moon rotates on its axis at exactly the same rate that it orbits Earth, a phenomenon called synchronous rotation or tidal locking, which means the same hemisphere of the moon always faces Earth, while the opposite side remains permanently turned away from us, often misleadingly called the dark side, though it receives just as much sunlight as the near side over the course of a lunar day. The sixth fact tells us that a day on the moon, the time from one sunrise to the next at any given location on the lunar surface, lasts about 29.5 Earth days, meaning that locations on the moon experience approximately 2 weeks of continuous daylight, followed by 2 weeks of continuous darkness, with no atmospheric twilight to soften the transition between day and night. The seventh fact is that the moon has only about 1/6 the surface gravity of Earth due to its much smaller mass, meaning that if you weigh 150 pounds on Earth, you would weigh only 25 pounds on the lunar surface, allowing the Apollo astronauts to bounce easily in their bulky spacesuits, and making the famous footage of them hopping across the lunar landscape possible. The eighth fact reveals that the moon has essentially no atmosphere, technically possessing an extremely tenuous exosphere with a total mass of only about 10 metric tons compared to Earth's atmosphere of 5 quadrillion metric tons. And this near-perfect vacuum means there is no weather, no wind erosion, no sound transmission, and no protection from meteorite impacts or harmful solar and cosmic radiation. The ninth fact tells us that without an atmosphere to scatter sunlight, the sky on the moon appears pitch black even during the lunar day, and stars would be visible alongside the brilliant sun, creating a surreal scene unlike anything experienced on Earth, where our atmosphere creates the familiar blue daytime sky. The 10th fact is that surface temperatures on the moon vary dramatically from about 127 degrees Celsius in direct sunlight to minus 173 degrees Celsius in shadow, a temperature range of 300 degrees that occurs because the moon lacks an atmosphere to transport heat and moderate these extremes. The 11th fact reveals that the moon's surface is covered with a layer of fine dust and broken rock fragments called regolith, created by billions of years of meteorite impacts that have pulverized the surface rocks into particles ranging from boulders to dust, finer than talcum powder, and this regolith layer can be several meters deep in some locations, covering the bedrock beneath. The 12th fact brings us to the moon's distinctive appearance, visible even to the naked eye from Earth, for the lunar surface displays a pattern of dark areas called maria, meaning seas in Latin, because early astronomers thought they were bodies of water, and bright areas called highlands or terrae, creating the familiar face or patterns that humans have interpreted in countless ways throughout history, from the man in the moon to the jade rabbit. The 13th fact reveals that the lunar maria are actually vast plains of solidified basaltic lava that erupted from the moon's interior billions of years ago, filling large impact basins with dark rock that contrasts with the lighter-colored highlands, and these maria cover about 16% of the moon's surface, mostly on the near side facing Earth, with the far side having very few maria. The 14th fact tells us that the largest maria include Mare Imbrium, the Sea of Rains, Mare Serenitatis, the Sea of Serenity, Mare Tranquillitatis, the Sea of Tranquility where Apollo 11 landed, and Oceanus Procellarum, the Ocean of Storms, which is so large it dominates the western, near side of the moon. And these poetic names reflect the romanticized view of the moon that existed before spacecraft revealed its true nature as an airless, cratered world. The 15th fact is that the lunar highlands are the oldest and most heavily cratered regions on the moon's surface, representing the original lunar crust that solidified from a global magma ocean approximately 4.4 billion years ago. And they appear bright because they're composed of anorthosite, a light-colored rock rich in calcium and aluminum that reflects more sunlight than the darker basalts of the maria. The 16th fact reveals that the moon is covered with impact craters ranging from microscopic pits in individual rocks to enormous basins hundreds of kilometers across. And these craters preserve a record of the intense bombardment that all inner solar system bodies experienced during the first billion years after their formation, with the moon's surface acting as a time capsule because its lack of atmosphere and geological activity has preserved ancient craters that would have been erased on Earth by erosion and plate tectonics. The 17th fact tells us that the South Pole Aitken Basin on the moon's far side is one of the largest impact structures in the entire solar system, measuring about 2,500 kilometers in diameter and reaching depths of about 13 kilometers. Created by a massive asteroid impact billions of years ago, that excavated material from deep within the moon's crust and possibly exposed mantle rocks, making it a target of intense scientific interest for future missions. The 18th fact is that many lunar craters have bright rays extending outward from them, streaks of ejected material that splash across the surface during impact events. And these rays are especially prominent around relatively young craters like Tycho and Copernicus, where the rays extend for thousands of kilometers across the lunar surface, appearing as bright streaks visible through telescopes from Earth. The 19th fact reveals that some craters near the moon's poles receive almost no sunlight, remaining in permanent shadow for billions of years. And because the moon's rotation axis is nearly perpendicular to its orbital plane around the sun, with only about 1.5 degrees of tilt, these permanently shadowed regions act as cold traps where water ice and other volatile compounds can accumulate without sublimating away into space. The 20th fact tells us that spacecraft observations have confirmed the presence of water ice in these permanently shadowed craters near the lunar poles, with estimates suggesting that millions to hundreds of millions of metric tons of ice may be present, representing a valuable resource for future lunar bases that could provide drinking water, breathable oxygen, and hydrogen fuel if properly extracted and processed. The 21st fact is that some peaks near the lunar poles experience almost continuous sunlight throughout the year, and these peaks of eternal light would be ideal locations for solar-powered lunar bases because they offer nearly constant access to solar energy while being close to the permanently shadowed craters containing water ice, creating unique locations that combine two valuable resources. The 22nd fact reveals that rills appear across the lunar surface as long, sinuous channels that resemble dried riverbeds, and while they superficially look like features carved by flowing water, they're actually collapsed lava tubes, where molten rock once flowed beneath a solidified crust or graben, where the surface dropped between parallel faults, demonstrating that features resembling terrestrial landforms can form through completely different processes on other worlds. The 23rd fact tells us that the moon experiences moonquakes similar to earthquakes, but generally much weaker, detected by seismometers left by Apollo astronauts that operated for years after the missions ended. And these moonquakes revealed information about the moon's internal structure, including the presence of a small, partially molten core, and helped scientists understand that the moon is not completely geologically dead. The 24th fact is that wrinkle ridges appear as long, sinuous ridges crossing the Maria formed when the lava plains contracted and buckled as they cooled, or when tectonic forces compressed the surface. And these ridges can extend for hundreds of kilometers, creating topographic features that are prominent in photographs taken from orbit and were obstacles that lunar rovers had to navigate around during Apollo missions. The 25th fact reveals that the moon's surface contains numerous domes that are ancient volcanic features formed when thick, viscous lava piled up around volcanic vents, creating broad, low mounds. And studying these domes helps scientists understand the moon's volcanic history and the composition of the magmas that erupted onto the surface billions of years ago. The 26th fact tells us that the lunar regolith contains tiny glass beads created when meteorite impacts melted and splashed molten rock into the vacuum, where it cooled rapidly into spherical droplets. And these glass beads come in various colors depending on their composition, including orange glass discovered by Apollo 17 astronauts that indicated ancient volcanic eruptions with unusual chemistry. The 27th fact is that the footprints and rover tracks left by Apollo astronauts remain perfectly preserved on the lunar surface, because without wind or water to erode them away, these marks could last for millions of years unless disturbed by meteorite impacts or future human activity, creating an archaeological site documenting humanity's first steps on another world. The 28th fact brings us to the profound gravitational relationship between Earth and Moon. For these two bodies form a binary system where both objects actually orbit around their common center of mass, called the barycenter. Though because Earth is so much more massive than the Moon, this barycenter lies within Earth, is interior about 4,600 kilometers from Earth's center, meaning Earth wobbles slightly as the Moon orbits rather than the Moon simply circling a stationary Earth. The 29th fact reveals that the Moon causes tides in Earth's oceans through differential gravitational attraction, where the Moon's gravity pulls more strongly on the side of Earth facing it than on Earth's center, which in turn is pulled more strongly than the far side, creating two tidal bulges of water that remain aligned with the Moon as Earth rotates beneath them, producing the twice-daily cycle of high and low tides experienced at most coastal locations. The 30th fact tells us that the Sun also contributes to tides, though its tidal force on Earth is only about 46% as strong as the Moon, despite the Sun being vastly more massive, because tidal force depends on the difference in gravitational pull across an object, and the Moon's proximity makes its differential effect stronger. And when Sun and Moon align during new moon or full moon, their tidal forces combine to create especially high spring tides, while when they're at right angles during first or third quarter moon, they partially cancel, producing smaller neap tides. The 31st fact is that the Moon's tidal forces have gradually slowed Earth's rotation throughout our planet's history, with days on early Earth lasting only about 6 hours, and the Moon orbiting much closer than today. And this transfer of rotational energy from Earth to the Moon's orbital motion is what causes the Moon to slowly spiral outward, gaining energy, while Earth loses rotational energy and the day lengthens by about 2 milliseconds per century. The 32nd fact reveals that in about 50 billion years, if the Earth-Moon system lasted that long, Earth's rotation would become tidally locked with the Moon's orbit, so that one Earth day would equal 1 month, and the Moon would hover stationary in the sky as seen from one hemisphere of Earth, while being forever invisible from the other hemisphere, though the Sun will become a red giant and engulf both Earth and Moon long before this happens. The 33rd fact tells us that the Moon goes through phases as we see different portions of its illuminated hemisphere from Earth's perspective, progressing from new moon, when the Moon lies between Earth and Sun, showing us its dark side through waxing crescent first quarter, waxing gibbous to full moon, when Earth lies between Sun and Moon, so we see the fully illuminated near side, then waning through gibbous third quarter and crescent back to new moon, completing this cycle in approximately 29.5 days, called a synodic month or lunar month. The 34th fact is that the same side of the Moon always faces Earth, due to tidal locking, as mentioned earlier. But from that near side, you would see Earth remain almost stationary in the sky, growing slightly larger and smaller as the Moon's elliptical orbit brings it nearer and farther. And you would watch Earth go through phases opposite to the Moon's phases, as seen from Earth, with full Earth visible during lunar midnight, when the Sun illuminates Earth fully from your perspective. The 35th fact reveals that solar eclipses occur when the Moon passes directly between Earth and Sun, blocking the Sun's light and casting a shadow on Earth's surface. And total solar eclipses where the Moon completely covers the solar disk are only possible because of a remarkable cosmic coincidence that the Moon is about 400 times smaller than the Sun, but also 400 times closer, making their apparent sizes in our sky almost exactly the same. The 36th fact tells us that total solar eclipses are relatively rare at any given location on Earth, occurring roughly once every 300 to 400 years on average, though several total eclipses occur somewhere on Earth's surface each decade. And during totality, when the Moon completely blocks the Sun, The solar corona becomes visible as a pearly white halo around the dark lunar disk, while stars appear in the darkened daytime sky, creating one of nature's most spectacular phenomena. The 37th fact is that lunar eclipses occur when Earth passes between Sun and Moon, so Earth's shadow falls on the Moon. And unlike solar eclipses, which are visible only from narrow paths on Earth's surface, lunar eclipses can be seen from anywhere on Earth's night side simultaneously. And during total lunar eclipses, the Moon often appears reddish because some sunlight filtered through Earth's atmosphere and refracted around Earth's edge reaches the Moon, with the red wavelengths penetrating Earth's atmosphere most effectively. The 38th fact reveals that the Moon appears to librate or rock back and forth as seen from Earth due to various geometric effects, allowing us to actually see about 59% of the Moon's surface over time rather than exactly 50%, with libration in longitude caused by the Moon's elliptical orbit making it speed up and slow down, libration in latitude caused by the Moon's rotation axis being slightly tilted relative to its orbital plane, and diurnal libration caused by our changing perspective as Earth rotates. The 39th fact tells us that supermoons occur when full moon coincides with perigee, making the Moon appear about 14% larger and 30% brighter than when full moon occurs at apogee. Though this size difference is difficult to notice without direct comparison, and the term supermoon is relatively recent popular terminology rather than formal astronomical nomenclature, with the phenomenon occurring several times per year. The 40th fact is that blue moons traditionally refer to the third full moon, in a season containing 4 full moons rather than the usual 3. Though in modern usage, it more commonly means the second full moon occurring in a single calendar month, which happens about once every 2.7 years, giving rise to the expression once in a blue moon. And neither definition has anything to do with the Moon actually appearing blue in color, though very rare atmospheric conditions following large volcanic eruptions or forest fires can sometimes cause the Moon to appear bluish through suspended particles. The 41st fact brings us to humanity's greatest adventure in space exploration, the Apollo program that sent 12 astronauts to walk on the Moon between 1969 and 1972, achieving President John F. Kennedy's goal of landing a man on the Moon and returning him safely to Earth before the end of the 1960s, demonstrating human ingenuity, courage, and the power of focused national effort toward an ambitious goal that seemed almost impossible when first proposed. The 42nd fact reveals that Apollo 11 made history on July 20th, 1969, when Neil Armstrong became the first human to set foot on another world, speaking the immortal words that one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, as he descended the ladder of the lunar module Eagle onto the Sea of Tranquility. Followed 19 minutes later by Buzz Aldrin, while Michael Collins orbited overhead in the Command Module Columbia, and these 3 men carried the hopes and dreams of all humanity on their journey. The 43rd fact tells us that the Apollo astronauts spent a total of 300 hours on the lunar surface during 6 successful landing missions, traveling about 95 kilometers in total using their legs. And lunar rovers, collecting 382 kilograms of lunar rocks and soil samples, deploying scientific instruments, taking thousands of photographs, and conducting experiments that revolutionized our understanding of the Moon's composition, structure, and history. The 44th fact is that each Apollo mission landed in a different location, chosen to represent distinct geological environments from the relatively smooth Maria Plains of Apollo 11 and 12, to the hilly Descartes highlands of Apollo 16, to the dramatic Taurus-Littrow Valley of Apollo 17, allowing scientists to sample diverse lunar terrains and build a comprehensive picture of lunar geology from the returned samples and astronaut observations. The 45th fact reveals that Apollo 13 became famous not for its scientific achievements, but for its successful failure when an oxygen tank explosion crippled the spacecraft halfway to the moon in April 1970, forcing the crew to abort the landing, and used the lunar module as a lifeboat for the journey around the moon and back to Earth, demonstrating the skill of flight controllers, engineers, and astronauts in overcoming life-threatening technical problems through improvisation, teamwork, and determination. The 46th fact tells us that the Apollo astronauts left behind various items on the moon, including 6 American flags, though these have probably been bleached white by decades of unfiltered solar ultraviolet radiation. Retroreflector arrays that allow scientists to measure the Earth-Moon distance precisely by bouncing laser beams off them seismometers that detected moonquakes. And personal mementos, including family photos, mission patches, and a small sculpture called Fallen Astronaut, commemorating astronauts and cosmonauts who died in pursuit of space exploration. The 47th fact is that the Apollo lunar samples remain the most valuable collection of extraterrestrial material on Earth, carefully preserved in special facilities at Johnson Space Center, where they are studied by scientists worldwide. And analysis of these samples revealed that the moon's rocks are ancient, with some highland samples dating back 4.4 billion years. That the moon was once geologically active with volcanic eruptions, continuing until about 1 billion years ago, and that the lunar soil contains trapped solar wind particles, providing a record of the sun's behavior over billions of years. The 48th fact reveals that the Apollo missions cost approximately $25 billion in 1970s, currency equivalent to over $150 billion today, making it one of the most expensive peaceful scientific endeavors ever undertaken, justified by the geopolitical competition of the Cold War space race, but producing scientific, technological, and inspirational benefits that continue to resonate decades later. The 49th fact tells us that only 12 people have walked on the moon, all during the Apollo missions, between 1969 and 1972, and as of 2025, all these moonwalkers are either deceased or in their 80s and 90s, representing a brief golden age of lunar exploration that ended over 50 years ago, though new missions are being planned to return humans to the moon, with NASA's Artemis program aiming to land astronauts, including the first woman and first person of color on the lunar surface. The 50th fact is that high-resolution images from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, launched in 2009, clearly show the Apollo landing sites with the descent stages of the lunar modules still sitting on the surface, the tracks left by astronauts and rovers, and even the shadows of equipment left behind, providing visual proof for skeptics and preserving documentation of these historic sites that may someday become lunar heritage areas protected from disturbance. The 51st fact reveals that the Apollo missions inspired an entire generation to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, demonstrating what humanity could achieve through dedication, innovation, and cooperation. And the images of Earth taken by Apollo astronauts, especially the famous Earthrise photo and the blue marble image, fundamentally changed how humans perceive our planet as a fragile island of life in the vast emptiness of space. The 52nd fact tells us that the Soviet Union also sent uncrewed missions to the moon, including the Lunar program, which achieved the first soft landing on another world with Lunar 9 in 1966, returned the first lunar samples to Earth with Lunar 16 in 1970 using an automated system, and deployed 2 remote-controlled Lunar rovers that explored several kilometers of lunar terrain, demonstrating that robotic exploration could achieve scientific goals at lower cost and risk than human missions. The 53rd fact is that China has emerged as a major lunar exploration nation in the 21st century, with the Chang'e program that has sent multiple orbiters, landers, and rovers to the Moon, including Chang'e 4, which made the first landing on the lunar far side in 2019, and Chang'e 5, which returned lunar samples to Earth in 2020, demonstrating China's growing space capabilities and contributing new scientific data about poorly studied regions of the Moon. The 54th fact reveals that future lunar exploration will likely be international and commercial, with NASA's Artemis program planning to establish a permanent base near the lunar South Pole. Space agencies from Europe, Japan, Canada, and other nations contributing hardware and expertise, and private companies developing lunar landers, cargo delivery services, and even planning tourist flights around the Moon, potentially beginning a new era where the Moon becomes an accessible destination for science, resource extraction, and possibly tourism. The 55th fact brings us to the Moon's composition and internal structure. For lunar samples and geophysical measurements have revealed that our satellite is a differentiated world with distinct layers, including a small iron-rich core, a rocky mantle, and a crust that varies in thickness, being much thicker on the far side, averaging about 50 kilometers, compared to the near side, averaging about 30 kilometers, possibly explaining why the far side has so few maria, since lava had difficulty reaching the surface through the thicker crust. The 56th fact reveals that the Moon's crust is primarily composed of anorthosite in the highlands, a light-colored igneous rock rich in plagioclase feldspar containing calcium and aluminum, while the maria are composed of basalt, a darker volcanic rock rich in iron and magnesium, similar to the basalts that form Earth's ocean floors. And this compositional difference explains the contrast in brightness between highlands and maria, visible to the naked eye from Earth. The 57th fact tells us that the Moon contains much less iron than Earth, relative to its total mass, has much lower concentrations of volatile elements like water and potassium that vaporize easily, and has oxygen isotope ratios identical to Earth's mantle, all supporting the giant impact theory that the Moon formed from material ejected during a collision between proto-Earth and another planetary body, with the lighter silicate-rich material from both objects' mantles forming the Moon, while heavier iron-rich core material fell back to Earth. The 58th fact is that the Moon was probably molten immediately after its formation, with a global magma ocean that gradually cooled and crystallized over tens of millions of years, with denser minerals like olivine and pyroxene sinking to form the mantle, while lighter plagioclase floated to form the primordial crust now preserved in the lunar highlands. And this differentiation produced the Moon's layered internal structure and explains the ancient ages of highland rocks. The 59th fact reveals that the Moon's maria formed between about 3.9 and 1.2 billion years ago, when massive asteroid impacts during the late heavy bombardment created huge basins that were subsequently flooded by basaltic lava erupting from the Moon's interior. And the relatively young age of some maria lavas indicates that the Moon remained geologically active much longer than scientists initially expected for such a small body. And if you're still with us on this peaceful lunar journey, if these facts about our celestial companion help you drift toward restful sleep while expanding your knowledge of the Moon's fascinating history and composition, we would be honored to have you subscribe to Beyond the Stars so you can continue exploring cosmic mysteries with us each week. And by subscribing, you support the creation of thoughtful astronomical content. The 60th fact tells us that the Moon's small size relative to Earth means it cooled much more rapidly, losing internal heat faster than our planet and becoming geologically inactive much earlier, with volcanic activity apparently ceasing about 1 billion years ago, and moonquakes today being much weaker and less frequent than earthquakes, indicating that the Moon is essentially a dead world, geologically speaking, though minor activity may still occur. The 61st fact is that the Moon lacks a significant magnetic field today, with only weak, localized magnetic anomalies detected in some regions. But analysis of lunar rocks shows that some contain magnetized minerals, indicating the Moon had a much stronger global magnetic field billions of years ago, possibly generated by a dynamo in its molten core similar to Earth's magnetic field. And understanding why this field disappeared remains an active area of research. The 62nd fact reveals that the asymmetry between the Moon's near and far sides extends beyond just the distribution of Maria, with the center of mass being offset about 2 kilometers toward Earth from the geometric center. The far side crust being much thicker, and even the shape being slightly elongated toward Earth, all consequences of tidal forces and the Moon's thermal evolution. The 63rd fact tells us that measurements from spacecraft orbiters have revealed mass concentrations called mascons beneath several large impact basins, representing extra dense material, probably upwelling mantle rock or pools of solidified basalt that cause slight increases in gravitational pull affecting spacecraft orbits and requiring careful navigation planning for lunar missions. The 64th fact is that the Moon's exosphere is composed primarily of helium, neon, hydrogen and argon at extremely low densities, with atoms so far apart that they rarely collide with each other. And this tenuous gas envelope is constantly replenished by solar wind particles implanting in the surface and then being released, radioactive decay of elements in lunar rocks, and outgassing from the interior while simultaneously being lost to space or redeposited on the surface. The 65th fact reveals that cosmic rays and solar wind particles have been bombarding the lunar surface for billions of years, gradually implanting atoms and causing radiation damage in surface rocks and minerals. And studying these effects in returned lunar samples helps scientists understand the history of solar activity and cosmic ray flux over geological timescales. The 66th fact tells us that the lunar regolith contains tiny metallic particles of iron reduced from iron oxides in the rock by micrometeorite impacts and solar wind hydrogen, creating iron dust that sticks to spacesuits and equipment through electrostatic attraction and chemical bonding, presenting challenges for future lunar explorers who will need to prevent this abrasive dust from contaminating habitats and damaging seals. The 67th fact is that some lunar samples contain orange and green glass beads formed during ancient volcanic eruptions, when molten lava containing dissolved gases erupted in fire fountain-style eruptions. The rapid pressure drop caused the gases to exsolve, explosively fragmenting the lava into tiny droplets that cooled into colored glass spherules before falling back to the surface. The 68th fact reveals that the ages of lunar craters can be estimated by counting the number of smaller craters superimposed on them, since older surfaces have accumulated more impacts. And by calibrating this crater counting technique using absolute ages measured from Apollo samples, scientists can estimate the ages of surfaces throughout the solar system, providing a tool for understanding the geological histories of other rocky planets and moons. The 69th fact brings us to the Moon's potential as a destination for future human settlement and resource utilization. For our celestial companion offers numerous advantages as humanity's first foothold in deep space, including proximity to Earth, allowing rapid communication and relatively quick travel times, low gravity reducing the energy needed for landing and launch, abundant solar energy on polar peaks of eternal light, and resources including water ice, metals, and elements that could support long-term habitation. The 70th fact reveals that water ice discovered in permanently shadowed craters near the lunar poles represents one of the Moon's most valuable resources, because water can be split into hydrogen and oxygen, providing breathable air and rocket propellant used directly for drinking and agriculture. and employed in industrial processes, potentially eliminating the need to transport these heavy resources from Earth at enormous cost. The 71st fact tells us that lunar regolith contains oxygen bound in mineral form, making up about 40% of the soil by weight, and various extraction processes have been proposed to liberate this oxygen for use by future lunar settlers, with the remaining silicon, aluminum, iron, and other metals potentially used for construction and manufacturing, making the moon potentially self-sufficient in many basic materials. The 72nd fact is that helium-3, a rare isotope on Earth, but relatively abundant in lunar soil where it has been deposited by solar wind over billions of years, could potentially serve as fuel for future fusion reactors if that technology becomes practical. And some have proposed mining lunar helium-3 and transporting it to Earth, though the economics and feasibility of this remain highly speculative. The 73rd fact reveals that the moon's low gravity of 1/6 Earth makes it an ideal location for launching spacecraft to other destinations in the solar system, because escaping lunar gravity requires much less energy than escaping Earth. Air and rocket fuel produced from lunar water could enable refueling stations supporting missions to Mars and beyond, without the enormous cost of lifting fuel from Earth's surface. The 74th fact tells us that several space agencies and private companies have announced plans for permanent lunar bases, with NASA's Artemis program aiming to establish sustainable presence near the South Pole, where access to both sunlight and water ice is possible. China and Russia planning a joint international lunar research station, and companies like SpaceX developing transportation systems that could support lunar settlements. The 75th fact is that proposed lunar bases would likely be constructed underground or covered with regolith to provide radiation shielding, since the moon's lack of atmosphere and magnetic field means surface structures would be exposed to harmful solar and cosmic radiation. And underground facilities would also maintain more stable temperatures, avoiding the extreme variations of the day-night cycle. The 76th fact reveals that 3D printing using lunar regolith as construction material has been successfully demonstrated in laboratories on Earth, and future missions might employ robotic systems to print habitation modules, roads and landing pads directly from local materials, reducing the mass that must be transported from Earth and enabling large-scale construction. The 77th fact tells us that agriculture in lunar greenhouses could provide fresh food for settlers while recycling air and water, though plants would need to be grown in artificial soil created from lunar regolith, supplemented with organic matter and nutrients, and the 2-week day-night cycle would require artificial lighting during the long lunar night to maintain crop growth. The 78th fact is that communication delays between Earth and Moon are minimal, with radio signals taking only about 1.3 seconds to travel each direction, allowing near real-time conversation and remote operation of equipment, unlike Mars, where communication delays of several minutes make real-time control impossible, giving the Moon advantages for teleoperation and emergency response. The 79th fact reveals that lunar tourism has been proposed by several companies, with plans for hotels, brief surface excursions for paying customers, and even permanent settlements for those willing to live on the Moon, though the enormous costs, technical challenges, and health risks make near-term lunar tourism available only to the extremely wealthy if it happens at all. The 80th fact tells us that the legal status of lunar resources and territorial claims remains ambiguous under current international law, with the Outer Space Treaty of 1967 prohibiting national appropriation of celestial bodies, but not clearly addressing whether private entities or individuals can claim ownership of resources they extract, and international discussions continue about creating regulatory frameworks for lunar activities. The 81st fact is that some scientists have proposed building large astronomical telescopes on the moon's far side, where they would be shielded from Earth's radio emissions and optical light pollution, allowing observations impossible from Earth or even from Earth orbit. And the stable environment and low gravity would enable construction of enormous telescope arrays that could revolutionize astronomy. The 82nd fact reveals that studying lunar samples and history helps scientists understand Earth's early history, because the moon preserves a record of the inner solar system's first billion years that has been erased on Earth by plate tectonics, erosion and geological activity, making the moon a kind of Rosetta Stone for deciphering conditions during our planet's formation. The 83rd fact tells us that lunar bases could serve as test beds for technologies needed for Mars colonization, including closed-loop life support systems, radiation protection methods, in-situ resource utilization, and autonomous operations, allowing these systems to be developed and proven in an environment where Earth is only 3 days away for emergency assistance or resupply. The 84th fact is that some have proposed that human civilization should establish a backup on the moon to preserve knowledge and possibly genetic material in case of a catastrophic event on Earth, creating a failsafe for our species, though this remains highly speculative and would require massive infrastructure development. The 85th fact brings us to the moon's profound place in human culture throughout history. For every civilization that has ever existed has observed the moon, incorporated it into their calendars, mythologies, and spiritual practices, and used its predictable cycles to organize agriculture, religious observances, and social life, making the moon perhaps the most culturally significant astronomical object apart from the sun itself. The 86th fact reveals that virtually every ancient culture had moon deities, with characteristics varying widely between societies, from the Greek goddess Selene and Roman Lunar to the Japanese god Tsukuyomi, from the Egyptian god Thoth to the Hindu god Chandra, with some cultures personifying the moon as female and others as male, reflecting diverse interpretations of the moon's nature and significance. The 87th fact tells us that many ancient calendars were lunar or lunisolar, tracking the moon as phases to organize time, with months originally corresponding to the period from one new moon to the next. And even today, several major religious and cultural calendars, including the Islamic calendar, Hebrew calendar, and Chinese calendar, maintain lunar or lunisolar structures, determining the dates of important observances and festivals. The 88th fact is that the moon has inspired countless works of art, literature, music, and poetry throughout human history, from ancient epic poems to modern novels and songs, serving as a symbol of romance, mystery, madness, transformation, and the divine, with phrases like moonstruck, lunatic derived from lunar, and honeymoon all reflecting the moon's influence on human language and thought. The 89th fact reveals that werewolf legends and beliefs about the full moon affecting human behavior persist in popular culture, despite scientific studies finding no evidence for increased emergency room visits, births, psychiatric admissions, or criminal activity during full moons, demonstrating how powerful cultural beliefs can be, even when unsupported by empirical evidence. The 90th fact tells us that the moon has played practical roles in human civilization beyond mythology and timekeeping, with sailors using the moon's position to navigate by night and calculate tides for safe harbor entry. Farmers planting crops according to lunar cycles, though scientific support for planting by moon phases is weak at best, and travelers relying on moonlight to illuminate nighttime journeys before artificial lighting became widespread. The 91st fact is that the decision to go to the moon during the Cold War space race was driven primarily by geopolitical competition rather than scientific curiosity, with President Kennedy's 1961 commitment to land on the moon serving as much to demonstrate American technological superiority and free world leadership as to expand knowledge. Yet the scientific and technological legacy of Apollo extended far beyond its original political motivations. The 92nd fact reveals that the famous debate about whether the moon landing was faked continues in some circles despite overwhelming evidence, including independent verification by other nations' tracking stations, lunar samples whose properties couldn't be replicated on Earth laser reflectors left by astronauts that still function today, and the sheer implausibility of maintaining such a conspiracy involving thousands of people for over 50 years, demonstrating how conspiracy theories can persist despite being thoroughly debunked. The 93rd fact tells us that the Apollo mission's images of Earth from the moon, particularly Earthrise and the blue marble photographs, profoundly influenced environmental consciousness and the modern environmental movement, by showing our planet as a fragile blue sphere floating in the blackness of space, making the concept of spaceship Earth real and visceral in ways that words could not. The 94th fact is that watching the moon through binoculars or a small telescope remains one of astronomy's most accessible and rewarding experiences, with craters, mountains, and Maria visible in stunning detail even through modest equipment. And many people have their first contact with astronomy through lunar observation, making the moon a gateway to broader interest in space and science. The 95th fact reveals that modern artists continue to find inspiration in the moon, with installations, sculptures, photographs, and digital art, exploring themes of exploration, isolation, beauty, and humanity's relationship with space. And the moon has become an icon in science fiction, from H.G. Wells' First Men in the Moon to countless films and novels imagining lunar colonies, adventures, and encounters. The 96th fact tells us that several companies have proposed sending human ashes to the moon for memorial purposes, allowing the deceased to rest on the lunar surface. Though this has sparked ethical debates about respecting the moon as common heritage of humanity versus individual rights to commemorate loved ones in meaningful ways. The 97th fact is that moon photography has exploded with the advent of smartphones and digital cameras, enabling millions of people to capture lunar images and share them through social media, democratizing lunar observation and creating a global community of moon enthusiasts who track lunar phases, supermoons, eclipses, and conjunctions with planets. The 98th fact reveals that some indigenous cultures maintain traditional lunar knowledge and stories passed down through generations, connecting their peoples to the moon through unique perspectives that differ from Western scientific frameworks, while containing their own insights about cycles, seasons, and relationships between Earth, moon, and sky. The 99th fact tells us that the moon continues to inspire new generations to study science, pursue careers in aerospace, and support space exploration, with every new mission discovery or dramatic image renewing public interest and demonstrating that the moon remains relevant, not just as a scientific subject, but as a source of wonder and aspiration. The 100th fact completes our journey by noting that anyone can observe the moon, regardless of equipment, light pollution, or location, making it the most accessible astronomical object for learning and enjoyment, visible on most nights as it progresses through its phases. And even basic observation with the naked eye reveals fascinating details about its motion, changing appearance, and relationship with Earth that have captivated humans throughout history and continue to offer endless opportunities for discovery and appreciation. Now let us explore some practical aspects of lunar observation and the various phenomena visible from Earth that enhance our understanding and enjoyment of our celestial companion. The moon is visible during the day more often than many people realize, particularly during the first and last quarter phases, when it rises around noon or remains visible until mid-morning, appearing as a pale, ghostly presence against the blue sky that is nevertheless clearly defined and showing the same features visible at night. When observing the moon through telescopes or binoculars, the best viewing is often along the terminator, the line dividing the lit and dark portions of the lunar surface, where the sun's low angle creates long shadows that make craters, mountains, and other topographic features stand out dramatically in stark relief, providing a three-dimensional appearance. The moon appears different sizes throughout the year due to its elliptical orbit. And when full moon occurs at perigee, creating what is popularly called a supermoon, it appears noticeably larger and brighter than when full moon occurs at apogee. Though this size difference is difficult to perceive without side-by-side comparison, and the term supermoon is more marketing than astronomy, the moon illusion is a psychological phenomenon where the moon appears much larger when near the horizon than when high in the sky, despite subtending the same angular size, and this illusion has been studied for centuries, with explanations involving how our brain interprets size in relation to foreground objects and the compressed appearance of the sky dome. Occultations occur when the moon passes in front of and blocks distant stars or occasionally planets from view. And these events are scientifically valuable for measuring the moon's position precisely and studying stellar properties while providing dramatic viewing opportunities, as stars suddenly blink out behind the moon's advancing edge and later reappear. The moon's orbit is inclined about 5 degrees to Earth's orbital plane around the sun, called the ecliptic, which is why we don't have lunar and solar eclipses every month, as these only occur when the moon crosses the ecliptic plane at the same time. It is new for solar eclipses or full for lunar eclipses, conditions that align roughly twice per year during eclipse seasons. Lunar transient phenomena are temporary changes on the moon's surface reported by some observers, including temporary obscurations of features, colored glows, or brightening, though most reported phenomena have been difficult to verify and may result from atmospheric effects, observer error, or genuine but rare events like meteorite impacts or possible outgassing from the lunar interior. Moonrise and moonset times vary considerably throughout the month and year, with the moon sometimes rising in afternoon and other times not until late evening, and the moon can set at any time of day or night, depending on its phase and the observer's latitude, making lunar timing quite different from the sun's relatively predictable daily pattern. The harvest moon, the full moon closest to the autumn equinox, rises at approximately the same time for several successive nights rather than the usual 50 minutes later each night, providing extended twilight that historically helped farmers harvest crops by moonlight. And this occurs because of the shallow angle at which the moon's orbit intersects the horizon at that time of year. Young crescents, the thin crescents visible just after new moon, are challenging to spot, requiring clear skies and a low, unobstructed western horizon shortly after sunset. And in some cultures, spotting the first crescent after new moon marks the beginning of a new month in lunar calendars, making these observations culturally and religiously significant. Earthshine, the faint glow visible on the dark portion of a crescent moon, is actually sunlight reflected from Earth onto the moon and back to our eyes, demonstrating that Earth appears as a large, bright object in the lunar sky, just as the moon appears in ours, and this earthshine varies in intensity depending on Earth's cloud cover and seasonal ice coverage. The libration zones, the portions of the moon that alternately appear and disappear around the edges due to geometric effects, contain features that are sometimes visible and sometimes hidden, making these regions particularly interesting for patient observers who track the moon's slight apparent rocking motions over time. The moon can be photographed easily with modern cameras and even smartphones, particularly during crescent and gibbous phases when the contrast is dramatic though capturing fine detail requires telescopes with camera attachments and careful technique to overcome atmospheric turbulence and motion blur. But spectacular lunar images are within reach of dedicated amateurs. The moon provides opportunities for scientific contributions by amateur astronomers, including monitoring for meteorite impact flashes visible as brief bright spots, timing occultations of stars and planets, documenting unusual appearances that might represent transient phenomena, and participating in international campaigns to coordinate observations, demonstrating that meaningful astronomy doesn't require professional equipment or credentials. Radio amateurs have bounced radio signals off the moon since the 1950s, in a practice called Earth-Moon-Earth, or moon bounce communication, using the lunar surface as a passive reflector to achieve long-distance communications, and the slight Doppler shift and time delay of reflected signals provide practical demonstrations of the moon's distance and motion. The moon serves as a calibration target for spacecraft cameras and instruments testing new technology, before pointing at more distant objects, and its well-known properties and constant availability make it ideal for checking that systems are functioning properly, while its varied terrain provides diverse features for testing instrument capabilities. And as we approach the end of our peaceful journey through 100 fascinating facts about Earth's moon, this ancient companion that has watched over humanity since before our species existed, if you've stayed with us through this entire contemplative exploration learning about lunar science, history, culture, and future, we would be deeply grateful if you would subscribe to Beyond the Stars. Enable notifications so you never miss our weekly cosmic explorations. Share this video with others who appreciate peaceful astronomical content, and leave a comment telling us about your most memorable experience viewing or learning about the moon. For your support helps us continue creating this thoughtful educational content. The future of lunar exploration looks bright, with multiple nations and private entities planning missions for the coming decades, from robotic landers and rovers to human bases and possibly even tourism, suggesting that the moon may soon transition from occasional destination to regularly visited location with permanent infrastructure, supporting ongoing scientific research, resource extraction, and as a stepping stone to deeper space exploration. NASA's Artemis program aims to establish sustainable human presence on the moon, with the first crewed landing planned for the mid-2020s, targeting the South Polar region, where water ice and near-continuous sunlight provide essential resources. And these missions will include the first woman and first person of color to walk on the moon, expanding the diversity of lunar explorers beyond the Apollo program's demographics. China's lunar program continues advancing, with plans for the International Lunar Research Station, developed jointly with Russia, aiming to establish a robotic and eventually human base near the South Pole, demonstrating that lunar exploration has become truly international, with multiple nations pursuing independent but sometimes cooperative approaches to returning to the moon. Private companies, including SpaceX, Blue Origin, and others, are developing lunar landers and transportation systems under commercial contracts with space agencies, potentially reducing costs through competition and innovation, while opening possibilities for commercial lunar activities ranging from payload delivery to tourism to resource extraction that were purely governmental during the Apollo era. The Lunar Gateway, a small space station planned for lunar orbit, would serve as a staging point for surface missions, a platform for scientific instruments studying both the moon and deep space, and a demonstration of international cooperation in space, with modules and systems contributed by multiple nations working together. Mining helium-3 and other lunar resources remains speculative but intriguing, with proponents arguing that unique materials available on the moon could justify the enormous infrastructure investments required. While skeptics note that the economics remain uncertain and that protecting the lunar environment should take priority over commercial exploitation until we better understand the consequences. Scientific questions about the moon continue to motivate exploration, including understanding the full extent and accessibility of polar water ice deposits, determining the composition and structure of the lunar interior through seismic studies, investigating anomalous magnetic regions whose origin remains mysterious, and searching for pristine samples from the moon's earliest history that could reveal conditions during the solar system's formation. Some visionaries propose using the moon as a base for constructing large spacecraft and staging missions to Mars and beyond, taking advantage of the low gravity and local resources to reduce dependence on launching everything from Earth's surface. Though this remains a long-term aspiration requiring extensive infrastructure development that is decades away at minimum, the moon's lack of atmosphere makes it an ideal location for certain types of astronomical observations, particularly radio astronomy on the far side, shielded from Earth's interference. And proposals for lunar observatories include everything from modest robotic telescopes to enormous interferometer arrays that could revolutionize our ability to study the early universe exoplanets and other phenomena. Educational outreach and public engagement around lunar exploration can inspire young people to pursue science and engineering careers, while fostering broader appreciation for space exploration. Benefits and space agencies increasingly recognize that communicating discoveries and plans effectively is essential for maintaining public and political support for these expensive long-term programs. The moon reminds us of humanity's capacity for achievement when we commit to ambitious goals, as demonstrated by the Apollo program, is success in landing humans on another world within a single decade of deciding to attempt it, showing what focused effort, adequate resources, and collective determination can accomplish, even with technologies that seem primitive by today's standards. Our relationship with the moon connects us to our ancestors who observed the same celestial companion from their vantage points throughout history, gazed at the same maria and craters we see today, and wondered about the nature of this mysterious object that illuminated their nights and marked the passage of time, creating a thread of shared human experience extending across millennia. The moon teaches us about Earth's history and evolution through the preserved record of impacts, volcanic activity, and early solar system conditions that have been erased on our geologically active planet, making our satellite a Rosetta Stone for understanding planetary formation and the violent early period when worlds were still being assembled from smaller bodies. As you drift toward peaceful sleep tonight, carrying these facts about the moon in your mind, remember that this ancient world continues its eternal dance around Earth, a companion that has been with our planet for over 4 billion years, that will outlast human civilization by billions more years, and that connects us to the cosmos in profound ways, both practical and spiritual. The moon has witnessed the entire history of life on Earth, from the first primitive cells to the emergence of complex organisms, to the evolution of humans who eventually developed the technology to visit its surface and plant flags in its ancient dust, demonstrating the remarkable journey from simple chemistry to spacefaring intelligence. May this lunar journey leave you with a sense of wonder about our cosmic neighborhood, an appreciation for the moon's influence on Earth and humanity, and perhaps some pleasant dreams of silver-light ancient craters, and the profound silence of the lunar surface where 12 humans have walked, and where future generations may build homes, conduct science, and gaze back at Earth hanging in their black sky as a brilliant blue and white jewel. The moon invites us to look up from our daily concerns, to contemplate our place in the universe, to remember that we live on a planet accompanied by a large natural satellite that moderates our climate, creates tides, and lights our nights, and to dream of future possibilities when the moon may host permanent human presence, expanding our civilization beyond Earth. And now, as sleep embraces you, may you rest peacefully, knowing that outside your window or above the clouds, if your sky is overcast, the moon continues its patient orbit around our planet, passing through its phases in the same pattern that has repeated for billions of years, and will continue repeating for billions more, a constant companion in the ever-changing cosmos. And we thank you for spending this time with us, exploring the wonders of our nearest celestial neighbor. We invite you once more to subscribe to Beyond the Stars so we can continue these peaceful astronomical journeys together, to share this video with fellow moon enthusiasts, and to return next week as we explore new cosmic destinations. And may the gentle light of the moon accompany your dreams tonight, and always good night.